So people are enjoying the sun, enjoying the day away from the busy, crowded city, enjoying watching the children run around and music. And at a certain point, it's not exactly clear in people's minds, but at a certain point, puffs of smoke begin coming up the stairs onto the upper deck. And a deckhand, it's kind of a different day. I don't know what time they let you start drinking beer, but at 9:15, one of the deck mates was sitting right back here where our crewman is sitting, having his first beer of the day. And a little boy came running up to him and said, "Mister, there's smoke coming up the stairs." And he was annoyed, but he put down his beer and went downstairs, assuming there was always a lot of steam, clouds and such. And he thought the kid probably had seen some steam and having a Tom Sawyer wild imagination moment. He went down the stairs and saw that smoke was indeed coming out from underneath the door. Now, most people in this situation know that when you see smoke coming from a doorway, you can do a lot of things, but don't open that door. Well, he didn't know that, so he wrenched open the door, which again was right about where we are now, down below, and the smoldering fire that was there, smoldering in a pile of hay that had been left on the floor, jumped to life, because in opening the door, he had created a huge oxygen flow. This is a windowless room in the lower part of the ship that had vents coming in from the outside. So when he opened that door, the vents, which were being fed by the boat moving upriver, pushed a lot of oxygen. The fire leapt to life, and because oxygen is the most important thing for fires. And he tried to put it out, tried to cover it up, but it didn't work. So he just ran to find the first mate and some other people to take over to figure out how to fight the fire. And he left the door open. And so the flames came out of that cabin, out of that room, to a stairwell. And the stairwell went up three flights, meaning it was a chimney, effectively a chimney that was going to make the boat engage in a huge fire in a very, very short period of time. All right, does anybody have any questions? Yep, jump right in.
On the port side, we're basically trying to look at the left-hand side on the way up. We're going a little closer. You just passed Stuyvesant Town and Peter Cooper Village in the distance. Both of them owned by the MetLife Corporation, the same people who originally built Parkchester. We can see Tracy Green's old apartment in here. Also on the port side, notice the new Esplanade and all the walking space. We're going to get up to Carl Schurz Park. And that's really a contrast with what you see in the Bronx in terms of people's access to go down and smell and touch the river. Manhattan is about 4 times better than the Bronx. In the distances to the left, you'll see the sun glimping off the MetLife Tower. That's at Madison Square, 23rd. You'll see the Empire State Building. The Equitable Life is the one that's really coming off. This is the Waterside Plaza, the UN School on the left. We're coming up to Utah Island. There's always police boats around here because you may remember in the early 50s there was a Puerto Rican independence group, I believe, on Roosevelt Island that shot mortar shells trying to hit the UN, which they didn't. They splashed into the water, so especially during the General Assembly, there's always lots of police around. This is Bellevue Hospital. Around here somewhere, Ed, was the morgue where people were taken to?
Yeah. The morgue, when the city was a big city in 1904 with over 1 million people, 3 million people actually. So the city had a morgue along 23rd Street, which is just a little bit below where we are now. It was inadequate to handle the death of over 1,000 people in one morning. So they used a pier right next to it, sort of a covered pier that was like a giant warehouse, and they used that as a temporary morgue where they could lay out hundreds and hundreds of coffins and have people be able to parade by and to see them. So it was probably one of the most horrific places, in the aftermath of the fire, short of the actual wreckage of the General Slocum, to be down there by the morgue. About the walkways and all, it's really one of the great signs of how New York has really changed so much for the better in a lot of ways in recent years. 200 years ago, New York City's planners were designing the grid plan for Manhattan. They were laying out the straight streets and right-angled avenues and such, kind of a blueprint for the future development, and they set aside almost no park space because they said New Yorkers who want fresh air and sun can just go to the edge of the river. There are rivers, water's everywhere. They had no idea how polluted and how dominating how much the commerce would dominate the waterfront. So it would be a lot of smelly piers and warehouses. Well, now we're 200 years later, we're back to having the waterfront be a resource for people to for recreational purposes.
More or less under us now is the Midtown Tunnel 495 that scoots you over to Long Island. It's kind of a diagonal. So we were talking earlier in the program about those of us that get in the middle of the tunnel and breathe a sigh of relief when we start heading up. You can see the famous Art Deco Chrysler building at about 9 o'clock on the port side. The island that on the starboard side on the right is called Utont Island. And oh, by the way, you're going to see some shorebirds here. I think I just saw there's a cormorant in the water there. It's a nesting place for gulls, and you should also be able to see a big black kind of antediluvian-looking bird called the cormorant, and they're the ones on the top of that little arch. Utont, for those of you that don't remember, was a Secretary General of the UN in the early 60s from Burma, and the cormorant, as Ed knows, is there, and it's sunning itself. It frequently spreads its wings because, unlike many aquatic birds, it doesn't have the oil in its wings. So every time it dives, in China they're used for fishing. They put a little collar around the neck, and the bird dives down and brings back the fish to the guy in the boat. So there's that's Utont Island. And by the way, they're all cormorants on the top there, and I think I see an egret also. We have in the back of the boat an expert in birds and biology, my friend Gary Carlin. So anything to do with birds, be sure to ask him. Gary, you got anything on that? There's gulls on both sides, laughing gulls, terns.
Yeah.
Anything you wanted to say, Gary? Got it? We're going to come down, when we come back, we'll go down the Queen side, and we'll talk about Gantry Park and the Pepsi-Cola sign and some of that. We're now going on the port side of Roosevelt Island, which used to be called Blackwell's Island. The real estate people wanted the name changed. It was sexier to sell condos on Roosevelt, the old Dutch name, than especially with two presidents. So you're going to see on the left-hand side, on your right, you're going to see the remains of the old smallpox hospital. At one time, almost the whole island was a quarantine filled with hospitals for typhus, for smallpox, for tuberculosis, and also workhouses where people who had people paid off their debts by going over there and turning a stepping mill. But on the right-hand side, below the Queensboro Bridge, designed by Gustav Lindenthal, who also designed the Hellgate, the beautiful Hellgate Bridge we're going to see in Hellgate. There's a cormorants there.
All right. My children are in the back there. They know that I love cormorants for some strange reason. They are a unique bird. They don't. Phil already explained they don't have the oil to repel the water from their wings. They have to dry them. And sometimes you see thousands of them with their wings stretched out on the rocks, drying them. They also, if you see them in the water, their body is mostly submerged. They're not like a duck floating on the water. They float pretty much 2/3 below the water, and they are lightning fast underwater. They're really almost faster underwater than they are above. And the story, and here you get a great shot. This is about as close as I've ever been to the smallpox hospital. The person who designed that hospital is James Renwick, who was on his way to becoming a very famous architect. After he did this, he got the commission to design St. Patrick's Cathedral.
Smallpox hospital.
Yeah, and so New York City was not alone in this. Most cities put their unwanted institutions, their jails, their insane asylums, their contagious disease hospitals, their workhouses, their poorhouses on islands. And so Blackwell's Island, which was owned by the Blackwell family in the colonial period into the 19th century, was purchased by the city in 1828, kept the name, but then they began adding these institutions. At a certain point, they renamed it Welfare Island. That was back when welfare was sort of a good word. They thought it was more noble than charity, so they named it Welfare Island. and then later renamed it Roosevelt.